today?
We are learning about horse conformation.
Whoa.
How your body and muscles are put together and how they help you be a very athletic animal.
Whoa, that sounds so interesting.
It is. Come join us.
Howdy, and welcome to the Bar SC Ranch, where you will experience our journey of running a family business, caring for animals, and doing life together. Subscribe now and be inspired here at the Bar SC.
Hello and welcome to the Bar SC Ranch, where we are extremely passionate about the care of our horses. Today we want to talk a little bit about how a horse is put together structurally, their bones and their muscles, and what makes them really good at their job. So some horses, just like people, are more athletic, and some horses, just like people, are a little bit less athletic. What makes a horse more athletic or not? And what makes them suited to their job? So when we're looking at a horse or when we're using one here at the ranch, we like to make sure that our horses are going to be prepared mentally, but also physically for their jobs that they do. We are fortunate enough to get to take a lot of horses that can no longer perform their jobs that they used to for whatever reason. So what that means is usually conformationally, which means the way the horse is put together, there might be a flaw or just kind of something that's a little bit off and doesn't allow them to perform to their top potential. So it's really fun. Something that I've enjoyed studying is how is a horse put together, and then what does that look like when it's being ridden, and how does that affect what jobs that it can do. When we talk about horse conformation, we're talking about how the horse is put together. And I have had a lot of questions. Why does that matter, and how does it come about? Well, conformation really matters because it does affect how your horse is going to move in its walk, trot, and canter, and then what that horse could be used for. And then where does it come from? Most of the time, conformation is genetic. So horses are just passed down the same type of genes as humans are passed down their genes. But other times there are health reasons why a horse has poor conformation. So if a horse, when it's born, doesn't get the nutrients that it needs, the horse could have a sway back or weak ligaments or weaker bones. Things like that will cause poor conformation. Other things that can cause poor conformation are injuries. So if a horse loses part of its hoof or somehow bows a tendon or something like that, and the hooves aren't cared for, changes can happen to the legs, which ultimately affect the shoulder and everything else, the back. So things like that, the injuries can definitely cause issues with the conformation as well. So when we're looking today at conformation, most of our issues come from either genetic or injuries that the horses sustained before they were brought to our ranch. Either way, you can look at the horse's form and function and figure out how to give it a really good life and give it a job to do. When we're looking at a horse first, I like to step back and just evaluate the entire horse from the side. It's really important to see if the withers, this big bone right here, the withers is about the same height as the top of the rump up here. If one is higher or one is lower, or even vice versa, this is higher and this is lower, the horse's way of going is going to be a lot different. It's going to be more choppy or not as smooth because the horse isn't balanced across its top line. One thing to note, though, is that a lot of times horses, when they're babies and they're growing, they grow withers first and then the rear end first. So know the age of the horse when you're looking at it before you decide if it's not going to be even or not. So this horse's name is Willie. He's just turned 5 and he's coming into being pretty even now. His withers and his rump up here are pretty even. When we talk about a horse's way of going, that phrase simply means the way the horse moves. So whether it's at the walk or at the trot or the canter, the way of going is how it moves. And that is going to be affected greatly by the way that the horse is put together. So the next thing that we like to look for is if the horse is proportionate in its body quadrants. So what we want to do is look at the horse and divide it into thirds. Right here behind the withers, kind of draw a line right here, and then we'll draw a line right in front of the hindquarters, along there. And what we want is to see equal parts of the horse. And no horse is perfect, no horse is built exactly perfect, but there will be different things that can be affected by the horse when its shoulders are too big or too upright or too long, if the back is way too long or way too short, and if the hind end is way, way longer or maybe way shorter than the rest of the body. So this horse is reasonable. He's not perfect by any sense of the word, but he's definitely pretty proportionate. Hi, Willie. Pretty proportionate in his thirds. Another one of the aspects of a horse that I want to look at when I step back and I'm evaluating their entire body is I want the horse to look more like a square. So if we kind of envision the horse's body, we want these sections to be equal thirds, and we want the body to kind of look a little bit more like a square. So this is our horse, Bella. She's pretty new to us. We're still evaluating how she's going to work out for our trail program, but she's kind of a fun example of a horse that has a much longer midsection. So I just wanted to let you kind of look at when you take your line and draw it right behind the withers, and we're looking for even thirds, and then this line comes right in front of the hindquarters. We have a horse with a much wider, longer midsection than in the shoulders and the rear end. We're going to take you out and show you what she looks like to ride, and you'll kind of see how a longer torso can affect a horse in its way of going. So along with Bella having this longer midsection here, when we stand back and evaluate her body shape, we see more of a rectangle and kind of less of a square. So that is definitely one thing I would say is more negative about the way she's put together. Both Willie and Bella are two horses that have a lot of power and a lot of energy behind their way of going. But you'll notice that Willie has a lot more flexibility in his neck. He's able to have more curvature and his head is able to come down. We call that moving out on the bit or being able to carry themselves. And that comes from him having much better of a balance in his quadrants in his body. So his shoulder, his barrel, and his hip ends are much more the same equal sizes. And that just allows him to be a little bit more athletic in his shoulders, the way he moves, in the way that he can carry himself and bend and flex. So the bending and the flexing is the way the neck arches, both down and to the side. So Bella is a horse that has a lot of power and a lot of size behind her. She goes very athletically and energetically. However, you'll notice that because her back is so much longer proportionally than her shoulders and her rear end, she's just not as flexible or able to carry herself as much as Willie is. Her neck, it's really hard for her to bend and to get on the bit because she has such massive shoulder muscles and as well as a really long neck proportionally to her body. Willie's is shorter and definitely fits better into the square shape that we were looking for, whereas Bella's shape is much more of a rectangle, super long, which it just doesn't help with her flexibility. Bella also stands with her feet a little bit closer together than they should be. She doesn't have that straight line down the front of her legs that we look for in a horse that's going to be free moving. So as she comes down this sideline of the arena, you can see that her legs step almost in front of each other or very close. She almost hits herself when her legs pass each other on the front. And that can be a little bit of a detriment or a poor conformation quality, because she might accidentally end up whacking herself as she's asked to do more athletic maneuvers in the arena. So the other thing I like to look at when I'm looking at a horse to see if they're built well is to see how straight their hind legs are. So you want a pretty straight line from this point on their buttocks all the way through this is the hock and the fetlock. So you want to just draw an imaginary line down the back of the horse and just see how straight they are. Sometimes, just like with people, they'll stand with their feet toed in, or they could even stand with their feet toed out. And we'll show you some examples of what that looks like and how it affects their movement. So this is an example of a horse. This is Deuce. He's one of our wonderful trail horses. But when I look at his back feet, he stands very toed in. His leg is not straight, it's more bowed inward. And when we take you out to the arena and show you how he rides, sometimes people comment on how silly or funny his legs look. The good news is it works for a trail ride. The bad news is he wouldn't be super good at a show or really, really heavy exercise. So one of the other things I also like to look for is how straight does the horse stand on their front legs. And ideally, when you start up here at the withers, this big giant bone up here, there should be a straight line that drops right down through to the back of the hoof. Deuce here, he's got some conformational difficulties for sure. He stands actually we call it camped out. So his front feet are a little farther forward than they should be. They're not directly up underneath him. He also suffers from, you can see a scar at the bottom of his hoof. So that was why he was given to us. He suffered an injury on his foot, which in turn doesn't allow him to put as much pressure straight down on his legs. So he stands a little bit farther out. So this was a good indication right away, the minute I looked at him, that conformationally he's not going to be super solid for very, very hard, long work. We have a veterinarian who checks him out regularly and makes sure that he's okay for trail rides, short trail rides where we're on the flat ground. That works wonderfully for him, and I'm so glad that we can give him a good home for the rest of his life doing a job. But this is one of the hardest, kind of worst conformation problems that I've seen in a while on a horse, because they're just not going to hold up to very hard work. This is an example of Deuce walking out on the trail. He's clearly, you saw in the barn, he's got some funny conformation, very different than most of our horses. Thankfully, on short trail rides, flat trail rides, he does just wonderfully, and he has a very, very good high quality of life. But notice how interesting his legs look as he walks down the trail, because he's so toed in and narrow at the base. The legs look really funny when they're walking. This doesn't cause him any pain right now. We're keeping an eye on it. He gets specially trimmed so that his hooves are going to support his weird way of moving as good as possibly can for the duration of his life. But that's what a really interesting horse, if you were looking for good conformation, a horse that's going to have a lot of longevity and be able to do harder, faster types of events or showing, Deuce's conformation would not be good for that. Now we're going to take a look at Rose and this other horse, Charlie. Charlie is a shorter, much more compact little Arabian that we have. Charlie has a lot of really amazing qualities about her. She is more squarely put together with her conformation. She's got very proportionate shoulder, barrel, and hind end, but they are shorter. And this allows her to have a lot of power. It allows her to have a lot of stamina. She's stronger in her back than Rose is, but she's not as quick. So she can maneuver quickly, but in long distances, she's not going to have the moving out that Rose has. Rose is a little bit longer bodied, a little bit longer in her shoulder, a little more what we call freer moving. So her legs they don't move as up and down, they move more out, back and forth. So just a little bit of a difference. Rose came to us with a problem on her hind end, so she doesn't move as fast as she probably could without that leg problem. But she's very, very athletic and going to be a lot faster than Charlie would be. So you would want to pick a horse like Rose if you were doing barrel racing or real competitive poles, jumping, things like that. Whereas Charlie is going to be phenomenal for long distance things like endurance racing or shorter distance, less speedy things. I know today we've been showing you several examples of poor conformation as well as some examples of good conformation. The cool thing about our ranch is that we are able to take in horses that are not built ideally, or that might have some issues with their conformation and the way that they're put together. We're able to give them a completely good life where they are pain-free and super functional. They are wonderful contributing members that help kids, adults, especially people who haven't had a lot of experience with horses. They're very safe, so that those people can be around these horses, give a great life to the horse, and the horse is very life-giving to them as well, even though the horses are not built well and are as good as they could be, and can't do anything like super big fancy shows or super strenuous rides. They do wonderfully for the trail rides, and they are going to live long, happy lives. And we are so thankful that we have this land and have the opportunity to give these horses such a good life. We hope you learned a little bit about how horses are put together and how that affects their way of going. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, we'd love to hear from you. Like and subscribe and leave us a comment about what you might like to see in future episodes. We'll see you back on the ranch.